It's a real pleasure to welcome all of you here this afternoon. I see you're brave people. You don't let the tornadoes, the ice, the snow, the rain, the heat, none of that bothers you, right? Okay. On behalf of the First Bank, we certainly appreciate their support and help. And if you have an opportunity in a little while, tomorrow, wait till after the program's over. But go by and tell them how much you appreciate their sponsorship of These Are Our Lives. Uh, Today, it's kind of foolish of me introducing the speaker. The speaker ought to be introducing me. But I'm going to tell you what, one of the things that she won't mention is that just recently she went to Amarillo, Texas, and performed and won first place in the award there. So I want you to know that you all are fortunate to. I'm just amazed at the talent that she has. But you know that Dolores has been everywhere and done everything and seen everybody. And now she's known well in Texas. But of course, we've already made provisions. People say, Dolores Hydock, what we're going to say with your approval is that, yes, we know her. She's from Silicaga, Alabama. So if that's okay with you all. So, very good. We want to thank you all for coming. We'll be doing the same thing next year. But let me just say that when you have the best, there's only the rest. And the best is here today. Dolores, come forward.
Dr. Ted, you say, I've been everywhere and done everything. I'm so glad my mother isn't here to hear you say that. And you say Amarillo, Texas. How many of you have ever been to Amarillo, Texas? Beautiful place. This was not a competition. I did not win first prize in anything. I was invited by Chris Confessori. Do any of you know Chris Confessori? He's the conductor of the Alabama Symphony Pops Orchestra, but he's based in near Orlando, Florida. And of course, he conducts orchestras all over the country. And he and I had worked together here in Alabama, and then he was going to be the conductor for the Happy Holiday Pops concert in December in Amarillo with the Amarillo Symphony. And he asked me to come out and tell some Christmas stories with this orchestra behind you. And then to read, 'twas the night before Christmas, along with this beautiful, very modern arrangement, orchestral arrangement behind it. And so I got to do that, got to stand behind the percussion section. Are there any percussionists in this room? The percussionists, they have so many toys. It is really great, and especially for a Christmas concert. They got the jingle bells, and they've got the glass xylophone, and they've got all kinds of things, and it's really fun to watch the choreography. I was backstage in the wings right behind. There's 6 percussionists, and picture, if you will, sleigh bell. You've heard the Leroy Anderson sleigh ride song that's got the horse slap, and the whip slap, all the jingles and everything, and you watch them, and it is actually choreographed. The lead percussionist has to choreograph who is where and who goes to what instrument when. And it was really exciting to see them do this little dance with all the different instruments. But the best part was I got to wear my red sequined evening gown. So that was the first prize. That was the great thing about it. Well, thank you, Dr. Ted, for your always interesting and never predictable introduction. Appreciate that. Thanks to Dr. Shirley for putting together this terrific series, and it's been a really great series this past winter. I've been able to watch it on streaming, and it's just been such an interesting series. Thank you to Tracy and to First Bank for sponsoring this, and mostly, of course, thanks to all of you for coming out, as Dr. Ted mentioned, in the wind and the rain and the tornadoes and everything else to be here. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your being here for this, because I'm really excited to share this particular group of stories with you. I'm calling it the Story Stork, where stories come from, and I have never put this particular collection of stories together in this way before, and some of these stories I have never told before, so this will be an adventure for all of us. I call it the Story Stork, where stories come from. This past several weeks, there's been a lot of stories from history. A lot of stories come from history, the Wright brothers, antebellum, Mobile. And then, of course, there's stories that get passed down generation to generation, traditional folk tales. There are literary stories that come out of books. And then there are some stories that the story Stork delivers through another person. You know, you're just talking to somebody and they happen to say something and you immediately recognize there is a story. And that is what happened to me in these next three little bitty stories. The first one, I was at a banquet. You've been at this banquet. I mean, it's a room this size. There's round tables, 8 people at a table. Nobody knows anybody. And we're all trying to figure out what we have in common to talk about. And as the food was served, the woman next to me started talking about food. And she launched into a story. And as soon as she started, I'm thinking, I got to remember this. I got to remember this. I got to remember this. So as best as I can recall it, this is exactly the story she told. She said, I will never forget the first and only time I ever made turnip greens from scratch. She said, I was born and raised in Stamford, Connecticut. She said, to me, greens are something you putt on. But she said, somewhere in my mid-20s, I found myself in graduate school at the University of North Carolina and in love with this charming Southern boy named Taylor. Well, she said, don't ask me why. Somehow I took it into my head I was going to make Taylor a real, sure enough, Southern dinner. Black-eyed peas, cornbread, turnip greens, the works. She said, my 2 roommates, both of them native Southerners, told me I was crazy, tried to talk me out of it. But when they saw I was serious, they offered to help. They went with me to the grocery store, helped me select a bouquet of turnip greens. She said, it pretty much overwhelmed our tiny shared refrigerator stuffed in there between the Diet Cokes and the hard-boiled eggs. She said, I was pretty overwhelmed, too, at the thought of having to clean that vegetation. But then one of my roommates said, oh, that's no problem. You just clean them in the washing machine. That's what my mama always did. Well, she said, the day of the big event arrived, and my 2 roommates, polite as always, left me the house to myself to prepare. Now, she said, they had told me the secret of the washing machine. They had not told me the whole secret of the washing machine. They did not tell me that you're supposed to put the turnip greens in a pillowcase, wash them in cold water, delicate cycle, just a few minutes. She said, I washed them like you wash kitchen towels. Hot water, cap full of detergent, regular cycle, double rinse. She said, 40 minutes later, the machine came to a stop. She said, I opened the lid. There was nothing in there but 2 dead crickets. The turnip greens had vanished, gone to that mysterious place where lost socks and missing collar buttons go. She said, but you know, I feel like that day I took an important first step toward becoming a true daughter of my adopted Southern homeland. She said, that evening when Taylor rang the doorbell, I answered the door wearing a silk dress, pearl necklace, high heels, my brightest smile. I told him that for dinner I had made what my roommates assured me every really modern Southern woman makes for dinner for a special occasion. Reservations. So there's a little story that the story Stork just sent through that woman at the table. Or another time, I was having lunch with a group of friends. Somehow the conversation came around to mothers. And the woman sitting next to me, again, she starts in on it. You think, I got to remember this story. She starts in, she said, there is a fragrance, a scent that belongs to my mother. Jungle Gardenia by Tuvache. Oh, she said, not that my mother ever wore it. She said, no, my elegant mother would never wear anything so obvious and tropical. No, she said, mother wore Chanel No. 5. She mailed Jungle Gardenia by Tuvache. See, she said, my mother believed that paper money had an odor to it that postal workers could detect. And so whenever she would send my children, her grandchildren, a note, a card, a Valentine, she'd stuff a dollar bill or 2 in there and douse the envelope with Jungle Gardenia by Tuvache, confident that that would camouflage the smell and throw the mailman off the track. Well, she said, one day, not too long ago, my now grown daughter, Barbara, came to me and she said, Mom, I've smelled them all. I finally found your perfume. She said, Barbara handed me this little box wrapped in department store wrapping paper. I'm sure I looked confused. Barbara said, oh, it's not for you to wear. It's for you to mail. She said, when I was a kid, I always loved getting those smelly envelopes from Nana. And now, no matter where I am, if I smell Jungle Gardenia by Tuvache, I think of her. And I'd like my Craig and Emily to have the same kind of memory of you. My friend said, I opened the box. It was Shalimar, an intensely sweet perfume. And she said, though I'm a modern grandma, send checks, not cash, in the mail. She said, anytime I send Barbara's children, my grandchildren, a note, a card, a Valentine, I spray the envelope with Shalimar, sure that that powerful, long-lasting scent will survive several days in the mail. You know, she said, I think Barbara's right. It's nice to think that those children, no matter where they go, how old they get, anytime they smell that smell, they'll be reminded of a grandmother's love. Intense, sweet, powerful, long-lasting. There's a story right there. The third one of these stories I want to share with you came from my friend Tim. He lives in Atlanta. He is a do-it-yourselfer par excellence. I mean, he can make, build, fix absolutely anything. And one day we were over there visiting Tim, and we had to go outside and admire the triple-level deck he had built on the back of his house, gorgeous. And as we came inside, Tim said, last Saturday, I realized I've become an old man. He said, oh, it's not because I got my 55th birthday coming up pretty soon. He said, no, it's because last Saturday, I started to do a project here at the house, and I realized that what was true of every old man I know was true of me. I did not have to go to Home Depot. Everything I needed for the project was already down in the basement. 3-penny nails, he said, I got boxes of them. Paint, any color you want. Drop cloths, drill bits, I got them. You know, he said, I'm not really that bothered about getting old. I'm not really that worried about having to put sunscreen on my bald spot, wearing relaxed fit jeans, leaving my turn signal on the interstate. No, I said, there's just one thing really bothers me about getting old. I sure am going to miss those trips to Home Depot. But then a couple of weeks after that, I got a phone call from Tim. He said, hey, you know that whole getting older thing? He said, it's all right. I got a whole new outlook on it. He said, last week I was going to go over to my dad's house to help him do this project that my dad, he's been meaning to do this for months. Finally, he was getting around to it. We were going to be refinishing this chest of drawers. And before I went over there, I called him up. I said, so, Dad, you need me to stop by Home Depot, pick anything up for you? You need foam brushes, turpentine, triple-aught sandpaper. No, he said, I went to the store last week. We got everything. Just come on. So Tim says, I got over to my dad's house, and as we head down the cellar steps, he said, not basement steps, cellar steps. He said, I started telling my dad about this whole Home Depot thing, told him how I really missed going over there, looking at the hex nuts and the carriage bolts and the post hole diggers, running my hand along the smooth surface of a radial arm saw. He said, when we get down to the workbench, he said, my dad reached up, gave that bare light bulb a quarter turn to turn it on. He said, there hadn't been a pull cord on that light bulb in 25 years. He said, my dad starts rummaging around the cabinets, the shelves, the drawers, comes up empty-handed. No turpentine, no foam brushes, no sandpaper. He said, my dad reached into his pocket, pulled out his car keys, said, son, that's the great thing about getting old. You might have all the project supplies you'll ever need in the basement, but be blessed if you can remember where they are. Let's go to the store. So true stories just given to you right there. That's sometimes how the story stork delivers a story. Sometimes the story stork delivers just part of a story by train. No, sometimes the story stork doesn't give you the whole story like that. There's just, you overhear something or you happen to see something. And That's all you got. And you think, wow, there's got to be a story there. I don't know what the story is, but there's got to be a story there. And if you want, you can take that little tiny snippet home and you put it in the story blender and you add in some of your own experience, things that you remember, things that happened to other people you know, and you whirl it all up, and out comes a story. And that's what happened to me about 20 years ago. I was over in London, and I was visiting the Royal Academy of Art. It was kind of a gloomy day, of course, in London, and I thought, well, this is a good day to spend inside at a museum, looking at the paintings and the sculptures and the architectural drawings. Well, I came out, and the sun had come out. It had turned into a beautiful day, and I thought, well, I don't want to go down in the underground. I don't want to ride the tube to my next stop. I want to be outside. I'm going to take the bus. I'm going to take one of those iconic red double-decker buses. So I found the bus stop there in Piccadilly. There were a few people there, including this young couple. Young man, young woman, maybe mid-20s. He had curly blonde hair, these gold-rimmed glasses. She had long, dark hair, very serious face. And she was intently watching the young man who was flipping a coin up into the air. It came down. They both looked at it. Then one of them said something, and the coin went back up in the air. And my bus came. And I had to get on the bus and go. And I didn't know what happened. I didn't know why they were flipping a coin or what it was all about. But as I sat there on the bus, I thought, there's got to be a story there. And I decided it had to be a love story. Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of times, if I read a love story or I watch a romantic comedy, at the end, I think, no, that's not how it should have turned out. Did it ever happen to you? No. He should have or she should have. Well, if a story is just made up, it can turn out any way you want it to turn out. Not just for the writer, but for the listener, too. And that's what you're going to get to do right now, because I have 4 very short versions of what that coin flip was about. And you get to decide which one is the true one. They were standing at the bus stop on Piccadilly, the young man with the gold-rimmed glasses, the young woman with the long dark hair. Let's flip a coin, she said. Heads, I call you tomorrow. Tails, that's it. We say goodbye and promise not to see each other again and really mean it this time. She wasn't being cavalier, leaving a decision like that to chance. She really didn't know what she wanted to do about them, and neither did he. And they had been horrible to each other because of it. And a coin flip seemed as good a way as any to figure it out. He had been so golden, she remembered. It was funny to think of that now. But he had looked so golden. The first time she saw him, he was sitting in the cafeteria at a table next to a window, the sunlight pouring in behind him. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was the sun right behind him that made him look so golden with that blonde hair, those gold-rimmed glasses, that big smile just for her. Then there had been long afternoons together, the two of them studying in his dorm room. They were 20 years old and golden together. And so they spent those afternoons there eating cream of asparagus soup that had been warmed on a hot plate, peeling bright navel oranges that once they were sectioned filled the room with a citrus perfume as they turned their attention from each other to the short stories of Chekhov, Russian literature major for him, or the intricacies of the respiratory system, pre-med major for her. And then in the evenings, friends would come over to the dorm room. Friends would come to visit and talk and laugh and listen to music. Someone would put an album on the stereo. An album? On a stereo? And as Crosby, Stills, and Nash headed off on the Marrakesh Express, the two of them would slip away, the golden-haired boy and the dark-haired girl. And they would half run, half walk, half fly down the street to a nearby park, drop down onto the cool, dark grass and look at the stars and look at each other. They were 20 years old and golden together. What happened? What happened to the golden afternoons and the cream of asparagus soup and the whimsical wanderings of the Marrakesh Express? Neither one of them could remember. Years later, neither one of them would be able to remember what happened, what went wrong, but something did. Some small, unremembered thing expelled them from their paradise, and they couldn't go back. And it was over. He retreated into the gloom of Russian literature. Anna Karenina hurling herself in front of a moving train was a perfect metaphor for his mood. She stayed busy at her part-time job in the biology lab, counting fruit fly mutations, the doomed, pointless coupling of insects, a perfect metaphor for her. And time went by. A year went by. And sometime the following year, he ended up in London, taking a semester at the School of Economics. And she ended up in London working at a cafe, rethinking that pre-med major. And somehow they got in touch. Did he call her? Did she call him? That part of the story isn't clear. But they agreed to meet. And at first, and for a little while, it felt like a fairy tale. It felt like Humpty Dumpty was coming back together again. But then, the cracks in Humpty Dumpty began to reappear. And neither of them knew what to do. Keep working at it, let it go. And one day they were standing there at the bus stop on Piccadilly, and she said, let's flip a coin. Heads, I call you tomorrow. Tails, that's it. We say goodbye and promise not to see each other again, and really mean it this time. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a silver 50-pence coin, sent it spiraling up into the air. Tails, he said. I guess that's it, unless you want to do best of three. Tails again. Well, she said, the fates have spoken. I guess it's goodbye. Have a nice life. And she headed off down the sidewalk, thinking he was an idiot to let her go like that. And years later, quite by chance, in some totally random, unplanned, unexpected way, they ran into each other at a party and found it difficult to make small talk. And as they stood there trying to talk, she struggled to remember what had happened. Why did it all go the way it did? And then she decided it didn't really matter if she could remember or not, because the fact was she didn't care and was a little surprised to think she ever did. Or it could have happened like this. It was maybe a bad idea to begin with. It hadn't worked out for them before. Why should it work out now? But they were buddies. They liked each other. They made each other laugh. They had a good time. They enjoyed a lot of the same things most of the time, but not all of the time. And one day they were standing there at the bus stop on Piccadilly, and he said, you know, I'll tell you what I really hate. I really hate the thought that this might end up with us breaking up again. I don't know if I can go through that again. That was horrible last time. It's really a shame we don't just call it off while we're still friends. And she said, yeah, you're right, like right now. Like we should probably just call it quits right now while we still like each other. And he said, you know what, you're probably right. And she said, do you mean it? And he said, do you mean it? And she said, we'll flip a coin. Heads, I call you tomorrow. Tails, that's it. We say goodbye and promise not to see each other again and really mean it this time. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the silver 50-pence coin, sent it spiraling up into the air. Tails, he said. I guess that's it. Yeah, she said, unless you want to do best of three. Nah, he said. What's the point? Yeah, she said, you're right. Why drag it out? So I guess it's goodbye. Have a nice life. Yeah, he said, you can watch me walk away if you want to. Yeah, she said, like that's going to happen. And they both laughed and gave each other an awkward hug. And she went one way and he went the other way. And many years later, when they were happily married to other people and quite content in their separate lives, they came across each other on Facebook and exchanged cheery, newsy messages, both of them sincerely hoping the other one was doing well, and both of them sincerely glad that the coin flip came up tails. Or it could have happened this way. It was evening, dusky evening. There were just a few people there at the bus stop on Piccadilly, including an older man in a cap who was standing there watching a young couple, maybe mid-20s, a young man with gold-rimmed glasses, a young woman with long dark hair. And the young woman was watching the young man intently as he sent a coin spiraling up into the air. The coin came down, but the young man missed it, dropped it in the dusky light, and the coin fell to the ground and rolled along the pavement. And the older man, the man in the cap, stepped on the coin, just an impulse, automatic, something anybody would do. And the young man and the young woman turned and looked at the older man, surprised. And the young man called out, "Don't look at it." "What?" "Don't look at the coin," the young man said. "What do you mean?" the older man said. "What do you mean?" the young woman said. "I don't want to know if it's heads or tails." And then he turned to the young woman and said, "This is stupid. This is a stupid way to decide this. If this doesn't work out, it ought to be because that's what we want, not because of some dumb coin flip. Call me tomorrow. We'll figure it out." And then he turned back to the older man. "Thanks." But the older man was gone. His bus had come and he had gotten on it, and now the older man was sitting there on the bus looking at the 50-pence coin he had picked up from the sidewalk. It had been too dark to see whether it was heads or tails anyway. Or it could have happened this way. "I want to go to the mountains," Daniel said. Daniel was 9 years old, and Daniel loved the cabin where they stayed in the mountains. The cabin was dark and mossy and full of spiders, and you could hunt for snakes and pretend you were Daniel Boone. Daniel liked to imagine he'd been named for Daniel Boone. "No, the beach is way better," Maureen said. Maureen was 13 and Daniel's sister. "The cabin in the mountains," Maureen said. "That's gross. It's full of spiders and snakes, and it smells like wet socks. And we never see anybody up in the mountains, but we always run into all kinds of people when we go to the beach. The beach is just way better." That's what Maureen said. But what Maureen was thinking was that her best friend Regina and Regina's whole family, including Regina's older brother Richard, were going to the beach. Richard was 16. And once when Maureen was over at Regina's house and the two girls were making brownies, Richard had come into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, took out a carton of milk, drank it down right out of the carton, right in front of the open fridge, put the carton back in the fridge, wiped his mouth with his sleeve, then turned and looked at Maureen, who was staring at him. "What?" he said. Maureen was in love. The debate about whether to go to the beach or go to the mountain was taking place in a booth at the IHOP. 9-year-old Daniel and 13-year-old Maureen were there with their mom and dad on a Saturday in early May. And just as they had done for the past 5 years, the parents were letting the two children have a vote in where they would spend their summer vacation. "We went to the beach last year," Daniel said. "So," Maureen said, "that was last year. We're not talking about last year, dumbhead. We're talking about this year, dumbhead." "I'm not a dumbhead. You're a dumbhead." Their mother interrupted. "We'll flip on it," she said. "Heads, we go to the mountains. Tails, we go to the beach." "You always do that," Maureen said. "You and Dad, you always do that. You never just decide something. You always flip a coin about things." The mother looked over at her husband, who was reaching into his pocket to pull out the silver 50-pence coin that he always had with him. He looked over at his wife, sent the coin spiraling up into the air. Then he looked over at Maureen. "That's not true," he said. "We don't flip about everything. We just flip about the important things." You decide which one you want to have turn out. So that's how sometimes the story shows up. We ought to take a vote. I'm curious to know. You could let me know later. Well, sometimes the story stork doesn't bring you a story. The story stork just brings you a nudge that reminds you of something that happened to you long ago. And that memory becomes a story. And that's what happened here. Sometimes mothers have to let their children make their own mistakes, have to just stand back, watch the disaster unfold, knowing exactly how it's going to turn out, but letting it happen anyway. And that is why I spent the night before my 9th birthday convinced I was about to freeze to death. My 9th birthday came in January, but the September before that, when I was still 8 years old and just starting 3rd grade, my mother made a dream come true for me. My mother agreed, I think just to get me to quit pestering her, she finally agreed that I could join the Campfire Girls. Any of you know about the Campfire Girls? Yes. It's kind of like the Girl Scouts, but a smaller franchise. You know, it's like playing for the Atlantic Coast Conference instead of the SEC. The Campfire Girls earned honor beads, not merit badges. And our after-school weekly meetings were called council fires. You know, now that I think about it, I cannot imagine what possessed me to think I wanted to be a campfire girl. I was a city kid, happily living my little urban life of sidewalks and traffic signs and street lights and stop signs. I was never athletic, never outdoorsy. I still think roughing it means using a hairdryer with no cool shot button. But in 3rd grade, the Campfire Girls and the Girl Scouts were allowed to wear their uniforms to school on the day they had their after-school meeting. And so every Tuesday, there were the Girl Scouts in their light green dresses and dark green sashes. And every Thursday, there were the Campfire Girls in their white blouses and navy blue skirts and red kerchiefs. And so twice a week, I was reminded of these sororities of survival skills. I wanted to join. I was kind of drawn to the Campfire Girls with the vaguely Native American vibe. With the Campfire Girls, I would find my spirit animal, and I would learn to appreciate those 3 essential ingredients of a happy, successful life: work, health, love. Those 3 ingredients summarized and abbreviated in the Campfire Girls' motto: woe, he, lo. At our council fires, we learned skills that would no doubt come in handy one day when we finally assumed our roles as CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Skills like making baskets and identifying bird calls, tying knots. Though in October, we did get a practical lesson in business when we embarked on our big annual fundraising project. We sold donuts, not cookies like the Girl Scouts, not cookies that stay fresh a long time and come in sturdy, easy to stack boxes. No. We sold dozen boxes of donuts, highly perishable donuts that are really only any good if you eat them pretty soon after they were made, which meant you had to go around and get the orders ahead of time and then deliver the donuts and collect the money for them 2 weeks later on the day the donuts were baked. The Girl Scouts were learning to sell the delights of the impulse purchase. We were playing the long game. We were learning to sell the disciplined satisfaction of delayed gratification. And order today for donuts 2 weeks in the future. Well, somehow, mostly out of pity, I'm sure, but somehow I managed to sell my quota of donuts. It wasn't easy, because I would go around the neighborhood, ring doorbells, someone would answer the door. I'd say, "You want to buy some donuts?" They'd take one look at my uniform and say, "Don't you have any of those cookies?" We really like those chocolate mint ones. Well, on the Saturday morning that the donuts were baked, we were supposed to get to school at 9 a.m., pick up our stack of flat, sticky, greasy donut boxes that had to be delivered right away. And so my dad drove me around the neighborhood in the black and white Chevy, and I tried to deliver donuts to people who forgot they had ordered them, didn't want them anymore, or weren't home on Saturday morning, or Saturday afternoon, or Sunday morning, or Sunday afternoon. And my mother got very creative at incorporating glazed donuts into the family weekly meal plan. I did learn some useful lessons from that exercise. I learned that an inventory of durable goods is way better than an inventory that expires in 24 hours. I learned that an order without prepayment is really not much of an order at all. And I learned that a ham sandwich on a glazed donut might sound like a good idea, but one is all you really ever need to eat in a lifetime. Well, that was October. Then in January, the Campfire Girls went camping. Camping. I had never been camping. No one in my family had ever been camping. My mother did not understand the appeal. Why would you want to sleep outside like a hobo? My mother, child of the Depression, very proud of the fact that she and my dad owned their own home, firmly believed that you worked hard so you could get a good job, so you could buy a nice house that had a warm bed and a roof over your head. Camping, she said to me when I suggested it, in January. Why would you do that? You could get lost in the woods. Your campfire could go out. You could freeze to death. But the Campfire Girls were going camping, and I was going with them. It was the weekend of my 9th birthday. We were going to be staying overnight just one night. And we would be sleeping in a heated cabin, not outside in tents. This was not some Jack London short story where we were going to end up cannibalizing the 6-year-olds to stay alive. No. No, it was just 16 scraggly little Campfire Girls and 6 brave chaperone parents. My parents definitely not among them. Parents who would mostly have to deal with runny noses and cold feet, not coyotes and frostbite. The idea was we would get out to the cabin, we'd unload our things, and then we would spend the day hiking in the woods, learning to observe and appreciate the wonders of a Pennsylvania winter. The Campfire Girls went camping in January. The Girl Scouts went camping in October. Where was the challenge in that? Anybody could identify a tree by looking at the leaves. We were going to learn to identify trees by looking at the bark. And the forest animals, the deer, the owls, the rabbits, might be active and easy for the Girl Scouts to see in October. But hey, in October, we were delivering donuts, not spying on squirrels. We were going to encounter our wildlife against the stark backdrop of the wintry woods. Well, the woods turned out to be a little more wintry than we bargained for, because the night before we were to go, it snowed 7 inches of wet, heavy Pennsylvania snow. But the next morning, 7 a.m., 16 brave Campfire Girls showed up, all of us bundled up in our hats and boots and mittens and winter coats, and I'm not talking about featherweight down parkas. Oh no, these were woolen winter coats, long, left over from Napoleon's march on Moscow. They were heavy. They weighed 30 pounds dry, 50 pounds wet, held you down on icy sidewalks, gave an 8-year-old kid a little traction. We all climbed aboard the bus that would take us out to the wilds of the Lutheran church camp 8 miles out of town. It might as well have been Antarctica as far as we city kids were concerned. Well, the cabin where we would be staying was one big room, maybe a third the size of this room. Along one wall was a big stone fireplace, then tables and chairs in front of the fireplace, then along the back wall, a neat row of cots where we would sleep. Some of the moms and dads had gotten out there early to set things up, so start a fire, everything was going to be cozy by the time we got there. We arrived. It was a blazing fire in the fireplace, just snapping, crackling, and popping like the biggest bowl of cereal we'd ever heard. The funny thing was, that fire in the fireplace was the first real fire most of us campfire girls had ever seen. We lived in town. We lived in row houses, heated by gas-burning furnaces, not fireplaces. Well, we didn't know, and the grown-ups didn't want to spoil the fun, so they didn't tell us. But that cabin wasn't heated by that fireplace either. The cabin had central heating, controlled by a thermostat there on the wall next to the fireplace, a thermostat that the mom set to a nice, cozy 70 degrees. And then once it was set, one of the moms took her sweater and hung it over the thermostat so we wouldn't see the thermostat and spoil the surprise. Well, we got there, we unloaded our things, and we set out for our hike in the snowy woods. Oh, what intrepid trekkers we were, our spirit animals united in the call of the wild. Well, the chaperone dad, who was leading the way, told us that if we ever found ourselves lost in the woods in the wintertime and snow had obscured the path, we shouldn't look down, we should look up, and the outline of the bare treetops would show us where the path would be. Lost in the woods in the wintertime? That possibility had never occurred to most of us. It certainly never occurred to me. And even though I had a pretty good imagination at age 8, even I could not imagine myself finding my way home by reading treetops. I suddenly felt seriously out of place. What was I doing there? Why wasn't I at the library finishing my homework? Why wasn't I at Mrs. Noel's house taking my piano lesson? I knew how to get home from those places. What was I doing in the woods where I could get lost? Well, somehow all 16 of us made our way back to the cabin, hung our heavy woolen coats on the hooks on the wall next to the fireplace, ate our supper of hot dogs and s'mores, and sang some campfire songs, and then happily curled up on those cots and went to sleep. But as the night wore on, 16 campfire girls and 6 chaperone parents started waking up because it was getting really cold in that cabin. Had somebody left a window open? Did somebody leave all the windows open? Did somebody leave the windows open and the door? It was freezing in there. You could see your breath. You could hear the teeth chattering, the girl in the next cot. It wasn't until the next morning that one of the moms figured out what had happened. They couldn't, and they set the thermostat to 70 degrees. Well, they had. But early the next morning, one of the moms noticed 16 heavy woolen coats hanging on 4 hooks on the wall next to the fireplace. There were only 3 hooks on the wall next to the fireplace. One of the campfire girls had seen the sweater hanging on the thermostat, thought that was a coat hook too, and when she put her heavy woolen winter coat on it, it turned the temperature all the way down to off. Well, they got the fire started, got things cozy again about the time we were ready to leave. We got back to the school. My dad was there to pick me up, drive me home. Oh, I was so glad to see that neatly shoveled sidewalk right in front of the house. That path was clear, easy to see, no chance of getting lost there. I went inside, went to my place at the kitchen table right there next to the wall that had the heater vent on it so I could feel the warm air blowing up against my cold legs. I told my mother what we had learned about getting lost in the woods and how we all had almost frozen to death. And she wisely refrained from saying, "I told you so." She had made me a cake, a birthday cake, and as I blew out the 9 candles, I made my wish. That when I grew up, I would have a good job so I could buy a house that had a warm bed and central heating that worked. I quit Campfire Girls at the end of that school year, never advancing past Bluebird level. And instead of going to council fires, I spent my after-school time at the library, practicing the piano, making hand puppets out of brown paper bags. Words, music, art, That's where my spirit animal lived, not in the snowy woods. And it still does. I still hate camping. I still think roughing it means turning my electric blanket down from 10 to 8. I still don't like glazed donuts. But I'm grateful for my brief time with the Campfire Girls. I did learn a few useful survival skills there. I learned that an impulse purchase will beat out delayed gratification every time. I learned that work, health, and love, woe-he-lo, were pretty important ingredients of a happy life. And I learned that whenever I feel a little lost on my twisty-turny path through life, I'm probably better off looking up rather than down. Besides, it's the one thing I have in common with Madonna, Janis Joplin, and Shirley Temple Black. They were all Campfire Girls, too. Well, I think we got time for one more story. Sometimes the story Stork shows up in the form of random suggestions. People come up and they'll say, you should do a story about. And this happens a lot. People suggest all kinds of ideas, and I always appreciate that. I'm always looking for new ideas for stories, and some of the ideas work out for me, and some they just don't. But there was one particular random comment that kept coming to me from various people at various times, and I thought, I need to pay attention to this. And so I have decided that I will take this random comment that the Story Stork has sent, and I turned it into this story. In our effervescent digital age, words and ideas float on the ether, exist in electrons, appear and disappear with the tap of a finger, the flick of a wrist. But there was a time when words and ideas had a physical presence in paper and ink and lived permanently, we thought, in books. Books that had heft to them, had weight and importance. Books designed by people who cared about the thickness of the paper, the slant of the typeface, the size of the margins. There was a time when people loved books, owned books, books that had a particular place in the home, maybe the top shelf of a bookcase in the living room or a side table in a bedroom. And there was one book so highly valued, so frequently looked at, that if ever it went missing, if ever someone carelessly, thoughtlessly failed to return that book to its particular spot, there would be a frantic scurry to find that book and return it to its special place. It was essential. It was vital to know at all times where that book was. Every household, almost every household, had at least a copy of the book. Some households had more than one copy. And when a new edition came out, people anticipated with delight the moment that book would be delivered. Yes, delivered right to your home, way before there was any such thing as Amazon Prime same-day shipping. And when that new version arrived at the home, people could not wait to thumb through the tissue paper thin pages, eager not only to lose themselves in that book, but to find themselves in that book. Did they spell the name right? But now that book, once as beloved as a family member, now that book has gone, practically extinct. There are people under the age of 40 who have never seen this book, have never heard of this book. People over the age of 40 who might have heard of this book, who might once have had a copy of this book, who might still have a copy of this book, but if they do, it is not a recent copy. And if they do still have that not-so-recent copy of this book, they don't know where it is. It lies there, abandoned on some bottom shelf under a dusty stack of DVDs that haven't been looked at since Netflix came streaming into the living room. No, now this book has gone the way of the buggy whip, the 8-track tape, the smoking section of the airplane. A quaint relic of a long ago time when you could dial M for murder. A time way before there was any such thing as CBD oil, when you could get a little buzz by sniffing the purple ink they used in those mimeograph machines. That was the era of this book in its day. And so now, in loving tribute to a book that once had the power to connect us to whoever, whatever we needed or wanted, I will now read to you from the phone book. The phone book had 3 major sections, and I will read an excerpt from each one. The first section, of course, the residential listings that showed names listed alphabetically, last name first, first name last, which meant that the white pages were populated by a curious collection of characters like Bland Catherine, Blunt Nellie, Bony Jean, Boring Shirley, Fiddler Jim, Lively Brenda, Little Lou, Loony Shirley, Lucky Horace, Poor Bernice, Rash Ronald, Rich Roy, Sharp Amanda, Smart Sharon, Smelly Michael, Steely John, Strong Mary, 9 pages of Smith. Smith, a name that came from a profession. If you were a blacksmith, your last name was Smith. Makes you wonder where these last names came from. Abbott, Angel, Butcher, Baker, Bishop, Butler, Biker, Cook, Doorman, Digger, Diver, Earl, Farmer, Gardener, Hunter, Leech. Monk, Peasant, Riddle, Queen, Sailor, Tailor, Winner, and Zilch. Then, of course, there were the yellow pages with their eye-catching ads and clever slogans like, on-the-spot towing service. We don't want an arm or a leg, we just want your toe. When it comes to roofing, we're tops. Serving all your asphalt needs. If you don't call us, it's your own asphalt. But it's the category headings that arranged just so tell familiar stories. Pet adoption services, pet grooming, pet photography, carpet cleaning and deodorizing, pet training, animal bites, pet adoption services, exercise and fitness equipment, personal fitness training, chiropractors, orthopedic surgeons, recliners, snack foods, used exercise and fitness equipment, or obstetricians, baby furniture, daycare, bicycles, birthday parties, school supplies, youth ballet, instrument rental, summer camps, driver's ed, body piercing, discreet drug detection, crisis intervention, family counseling, tattoo removal, boarding schools. And then there was a third section in the phone book, a reference section. I don't know if you remember, there was a reference section, had things like the seating chart for the Civic Center or what to do when the tornado warning sirens went off. You're looking at me like you can't believe this ever happened. This is really, really true. Go ahead, get your picture of it. It's the only one you're ever going to see probably in your lifetime. But there was this reference section, and just like Moby Dick that had chapters and chapters about the whaling industry, this reference section had all kinds of handy tips, a lot of them project management tips, like this one. Painting trim in a closet full of shelves is time-consuming and tedious. Have truer words ever been written? But as you read the project management tips, you realize a lot of it is life management tips. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the problems in our lives could be solved by following tips like these. You can save yourself time by having a good understanding of what you want done. Often the problem is a simple one that you can identify and fix yourself. Plan to share responsibilities and work together. And finally, the advice that's useful in so many situations: call for help. And so there you have it, a velveteen rabbit in paper and ink, now replaced by noisier, flashier digital toys. But for those of us who once loved this book, who depended on this book, who welcomed this book into our homes, it will always have a special place in our hearts and our memories. The phone book, a cherished reminder of a long ago time when your heart beat a little faster, the world seemed a little brighter, the possibilities seemed endless. Anytime you heard those three little words, those three magical little words that people used to say all the time and nobody ever says anymore: it's for you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Don't forget, if you are not already on my email list, I'd love to let you know how to find me in different places. There's a sign-up sheet over there. I'd just love to have you in any audience, anytime. Tracy, Dr. Shirley, Dr. Ted, First Bank, thank you all again. See you in the autumn. Have a good summer.
Well, it doesn't get any better than that. And so I just laughed about your phone book, because when I was at the middle school, I had a library assistant, and I said, "Hey, grab the phone book and look this number up," and they went, "They don't." So that's when I realized we were in a different generation. So thank you all so much. And Miss Dolores, you always do a magnificent job. And she does have some of her CDs with her to sell if you want to stop by. But I'm real excited because Chad Jones just walked in the back door. He got to hear the last couple of stories. And Chad is with First Bank of Alabama. And I would love for you all to let him know how much you appreciate the bank sponsoring this series, so that we can come and we can have things like this for free here in our community. And Chad, I want to let you speak just for a sec, or however long you want to speak.
Everybody at the bank always laughs at me. They say he's never met a microphone that he doesn't like. So I promise not to hold you here very long. But I promise, Dolores, your advertising thought process through the yellow pages, everyone who has a First Bank of Alabama bag or anything in it, so this first with the 1 and the ST, who knows why we did that? Because in the yellow pages, whenever you used to advertise, the 1, the first, would always be at the very top. So we always wanted to be the #1 bank. So that's a very good, I love the phone book thing. I was over going, I think it's the Britannica encyclopedias. Chris and I had a great thing going. He was like, yeah, I think so too. Wait a minute, a phone book? No way. Listen, thank y'all so much. This has been so great to have just this series to occur. I know that whenever we came to the Sylacauga market, it was already happening. We just happened to be the one who stepped into the place of a formerly named institution. And we have been so blessed to be in such a great community. This place is full of people who want to continue growing, continuing to support one another. And that's what a community is about. And then, that's what we are as a community bank. And we support our communities. We make sure that you can grow, love, live, learn, worship, and we want to be a part of that. If you're not currently a part of an institution that is doing that with you for your finances and for what's happening in your life in today's financial world, look us up. We're just a block and a half away. We would love to be your bank. This is part of what we do. This is only a small thumbnail. Well, that's my pinky nail, but we're just a small pinky nail of what we do. I promise, whenever we walk into a community, it is to make that community better. It is to make sure that we can provide excellent service for the communities, and we just want to be a part of what you're doing today. Thank you for letting First Bank of Alabama continue to be a part of this community, and I hope that if you follow what happens in Sylacauga, that on March 18th, we're going to make a small announcement within this community that I hope makes everyone smile just as big, if not bigger, inside this community room, outside. And I hope that what I'm telling you today about our community bank being a part of this community, I hope that what we do on March 18th, if you're not currently banking with First Bank of Alabama, that it will encourage you to understand that we are a part of Sylacauga and the surrounding areas, and that we will continue to be a part and to grow our youth, our middle age, that's what I mean, and our over middle age, okay? So thank you so much for being a part of Sylacauga. Thank you for being part of this Brown Bag Lunch series. It has been a pleasure, and first and foremost, I should have apologized for my attire. I had to take my dad to the doctor this morning. We had 2 doctor's appointments, so I ran into the office, picked up, and realized, because I got a very nice note, and it said, today is the last day of this, and I realized that my schedule had not allowed for me to be down here. I jumped in the car, and I said, I'm going to make at least the last half of it. So I wanted to be a part of it, say thank you, and I hope that you continue to come as we continue to support this community and to continue to support this Brown Bag Lunch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm glad Chad got to make it. And again, we want you to mark your calendars for the 18th. Let's see what the announcement is. Thank you again to everybody for coming. And you know we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back in the fall with another series. But I do want to remind you that April the 1st through the 12th, I had to make sure I got my dates right, that is our Marble Festival. And so, you know, this is such a wonderful resource that we have here in our community, and it's ours to claim. So I hope you will all make a point to come out, grab a program off the back of the table back there, and make sure you come out and join us for that. Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you to First Bank. We hope to see you again real soon. Have a great week.